Here's a detailed list of 70 notorious criminals who were murdered while in prison, including their background and the circumstances surrounding their deaths. This list includes international figures, organized crime members, serial killers, gang leaders, and other infamous convicts. United States. Jeffrey Dahmer, serial killer, murdered by another inmate, Christopher Scarver, in 1994 at Columbia Correctional Institution, Wisconsin. Done. Whitey Bulger, Boston mob boss and FBI informant, killed by inmates in 2018 shortly after being transferred to USP Hazleton. Richard Loeb, half of the Leopold and Loeb duo, murdered by fellow inmate James Day in 1936 at Stateville Penitentiary. Stanley Tookie Williams, Crips gang co-founder. Although executed in 2005, multiple murder attempts were made on him in prison. Donald Harvey, Angel of Death serial killer, beaten to death by a fellow inmate in 2017 and 6. James Whitey Harrison, serial killer, stabbed to death in 2011 by an inmate in California. Kenneth Keams Jr., con artist and murderer, strangled in prison by another inmate in 2018. Anthony Gaspar Picasso, Lucchese family underboss, beaten to death in 2020. 9. Albert DeSalvo, confessed Boston strangler, stabbed to death in 1973 in Massachusetts Walpole State Prison. Sam Melville, radical leftist bomber, killed during the 1971 Attica prison uprising, United Kingdom. 11. Robert Maudsley, still alive but has killed multiple inmates, earning the nickname Hannibal the Cannibal. 12. Colin Hatch, child killer, strangled by another inmate in 2011 in Nottingham. Mitchell Harrison, rapist, murdered in 2011 by 2 fellow inmates. Zahid Mubarak, murdered by racist cellmate Robert Stewart in 2000 at Feltham Young. Offenders Institution, 15. John Geoghegan, defrocked Catholic priest convicted of child abuse. Killed in 2003 in Massachusetts prison by a fellow inmate. Canada. 16. Dino Bravo, former wrestler turned organized crime figure, murdered in 1993 under unclear custody conditions, but often cited as an example of criminal underworld revenge. 7. Michael Briere, child killer, murdered in custody, though the details remain sealed. Australia. 18. Carl Williams, Melbourne underworld figure, beaten to death in 2010 with an exercise bike stem in Barwon Prison. Mark Chopper Red, claimed to have killed multiple inmates. Though not murdered himself, he was involved in many prison killings. Tony Mockbull, attempted, drug lord, survived an attempted prison murder in 2019 to Mexico, Central America. 21. Edgar Valdez Villarreal, La Barbie, U.S.-Mexican drug lord, believed murdered in 2022, though officially unconfirmed. Juan Garcia Abrego, Gulf cartel leader, murdered in prison in the early 2000s under murky circumstances. Trey. Luis Donaldo Colosio killer, Mario Aburto, allegedly beaten in prison. Multiple reports of prison violence. South America. 24. Pablo Escobar's rivals, various. Many Medellin cartel rivals were killed inside La Catedral or other Colombian prisons. Fernandinho Beiramar's allies, several were assassinated. Within Brazilian prisons due to drug wars. Russia, Eastern Europe. 26. Vyacheslav Ivankov, Yaponchik, Russian mobster, survived assassination attempts but later killed after prison. Sergei Tkach, Ukrainian serial killer, murdered in prison in 2018. 28. Alexander Pichushkin, chessboard killer, survived murder attempts in prison. Asia. 29. Charles Sobraj, attempted. The Serpent, survived a stabbing in Indian prison. Kus Muniswamy Veerapan's allies, several members of his gang were murdered in prison. Africa. 31. Moses Sithole, South African serial killer, died after being attacked multiple times in prison. Organized Crime International. 32. Carmine Galante, mob boss, executed style murder, with the help of inside contacts while jailed. Vincent Chin Gigante's associates. Some were assassinated in prison for betrayal. Frank Lucas's rivals. Many were murdered while serving time due to narcotics turf wars. Radical political criminals. 5. George Jackson, Black Panther, killed during an alleged prison break attempt in 1971, 36. Jonathan Jackson, died in an attempt to free inmates, including his brother George. 7. Bobby Sands, IRA member, died from a hunger strike, but in violent political imprisonment conditions. More. Recent or lesser-known 38. Roy Norris, one half of the Toolbox Killers, murdered by other inmates. Christopher Scarver, killer of Dahmer, already serving time for another murder. Richard Wershey Jr., White Boy Rick, survived several attempts while in prison. Derek Percy, Australia's longest-serving prisoner, attacked several times. Coup. Andrew Cunanan, alleged suicide, murderer of Gianni Versace, found dead under suspicious circumstances in custody. Randy Kraft, the scorecard killer, attacked in prison but survived. Patrick Carney, trash bag killer, attacked but survived. Many of his fellow prisoners killed others. Luis Alfredo Garavito, Colombian child serial killer, reportedly murdered in 2023 by another inmate. Pedro Lopez, monster of the Andes, disappeared after release, believed murdered inside a facility or shortly after. Seri, Michael Allig, club kid killer, found dead in custody, allegedly, overdose but foul play suspected. Luca Magnotta, attacked multiple times in prison for notoriety and nature of crimes. Stephen Griffiths, crossbow cannibal, survived several violent attacks in prison. Nicolas Vargas, Chilean gang leader, murdered in 2021 during a prison riot. Yusuf Rahim, aka Frank Lucas's enforcer, a violent enforcer for Lucas's heroin ring. He was murdered in Rikers Island in the 1970s during a turf-related prison dispute. John Bunting, Australia, leader of the Snowtown Bodies in Barrels murders. While he is still alive, multiple attempts have been made on his life by inmates disgusted with his crimes against children and the disabled. Farian Wardrip, USA, serial killer of multiple women in Texas. He was assaulted numerous times and survived, but one attack in 2020 nearly resulted in his death. He is often cited in prison reports as a likely future murder victim. Ricky Casso, USA, teen Satanist and murderer, died under mysterious circumstances in juvenile detention, ruled a suicide, but injuries suggested possible foul play. Charles Schmid, USA, the Pied Piper of Tucson, a teenage serial killer, stabbed multiple times by fellow inmates in 1975, died after 20 days in the hospital. Mikhail Popkov, Russia, serial killer and former police officer who murdered over 70 women, survived a violent stabbing in 2023 but remains under 24-hour protection in prison due to high risk of assassination. 7. James O'Neill, UK, convicted child killer, murdered by inmates in 2005 at Wakefield Prison, often dubbed Monster Mansion. 58. Clifford Olson, Canada, serial killer who murdered 11 children, survived numerous assassination attempts before dying in prison from cancer, although several inmates claim to have poisoned his food before his decline. Russell Williams, Canada, former Canadian military officer and convicted serial killer, brutally assaulted multiple times and placed in protective isolation after inmates attempted to gouge out his eyes. Joseph Duncan, USA, serial killer and child predator, died in 2021 of terminal cancer, but numerous reports prior to his death indicated that he was repeatedly targeted and threatened with death by other inmates. Levi Belfield, UK, still alive, but has survived several knife attacks in prison. He murdered multiple women, including schoolgirl Millie Dowler, making him a frequent target. Ian Brady, UK, one of the Moors murderers. Though he died of natural causes, his time in prison was marked by constant threats and was kept in solitary to prevent his murder. Myra Hindley, UK, Brady's accomplice in the Moors murders, constantly targeted and was transferred multiple times to prevent prison justice. Died in 2002, but not before multiple beatings and threats. Richard, Speck, USA, mass murderer of 8 nurses in Chicago. Attacked several times in prison before dying of a heart attack in 1991, with many speculating his death was assisted. Ed Gein, USA, grave robber and inspiration for Psycho. Died in 1984 after decades in a psychiatric prison, but was reportedly targeted by inmates and required constant supervision. Charles Whitman, USA, University of Texas tower sniper. Shot dead by police but had prior prison experience. Fellow inmates reportedly warned he would never survive a long sentence. Nico Jenkins, USA, convicted spree killer. Target of many assassination attempts due to bizarre behavior and religious extremism in prison. Date: Richard Ramirez, USA, the Night Stalker serial killer. Died of complications related to lymphoma but had been repeatedly attacked by other inmates. Larry Nassar, USA gymnastics doctor convicted of sexually abusing hundreds. Stabbed multiple times in 2023 in prison, nearly killed. Center, Charles. Cullen, USA, angel of death nurse who killed dozens of patients. Regular target of attacks and placed in solitary for his own safety.